Five Little Peppers, Part 2. Margaret Sidney. More trouble. "Oh dear," said Polly to herself the next morning, trying to get a breakfast for the sick ones out of the inevitable mush. "Everything's just as bad as it can be. They can't ever eat this. I wish I had an ocean of toast." "Toast some of the bread in the pail, Polly," said Mrs. Pepper. She looked worn and worried. She had been up nearly all night, back and forth from Ben's bed in the loft to restless, fretful little Fronzy in the big four-poster in the bedroom, for Fronzy wouldn't get into the crib. Polly had tried her best to help her and had rubbed her eyes diligently to keep awake, but she was wholly unaccustomed to it, and her healthy, tired little body succumbed, and then when she awoke, shame and remorse filled her very heart. "That isn't nice, Ma," she said, glancing at the poor old pail which she had brought out of the provision room. "Old brown bread. I want to fix 'em something nice." "Well, you can't, you know," said Mrs. Pepper with a sigh. "But you've got butter now. That'll be splendid." "I know it," said Polly, running to the corner cupboard where the precious morsel in the blue bowl remained. "Whatever should we do without it, Mammy?" "Do without it," said Mrs. Pepper. "Same's we have done." "Well, 'twas splendid in Mrs. Henderson to give it to us anyway," said Polly, longing for just one taste. "Seems as if 'twas a year since I was there. Oh, Ma!" And here Polly took up the thread that had been so rudely snapped. "Don't you think she's got 10 of the prettiest, yes, the sweetest little chickens you ever saw? Why can't we have some, Mammy?" "Costs money," replied Mrs. Pepper. "We've got too many in the house to have any outside." "Oh dear," said Polly, with a red face that was toasting about as much as the bread she was holding on the point of an old fork. "We never have had anything. There," she added at last, "that's the best I can do. Now I'll put the butter on this little blue plate. Ain't that cunning, Ma?" "Yes," said Mrs. Pepper, approvingly. "It takes you, Polly." So Polly trotted first to Ben, up the crooked low stairs to the loft, and while she regaled him with the brown toast and butter, she kept her tongue flying on the subject of the little chicks and all that she saw on the famous Henderson visit. Poor Ben pretended hard to eat, but ate nothing really, and Polly saw it all, and it cut her to the heart, so she talked faster than ever. "Now," she said, starting to go back to Fronzy, "Ben Pepper, just as soon as you get well, we'll have some chickens. So there." "Guess we shan't get 'em very soon," said Ben despondently, "if I've got to lie here. And besides, Polly, you know every bit we can save has got to go for the new stove." "Oh dear," said Polly. "I forgot that. So it has. Seems to me everything's giving out." "You can't bake any longer in the old thing," said Ben, turning over and looking at her. "Poor girl, I don't see how you've stood it so long." "And we've been stuffing it," cried Polly merrily, "till 'twon't stuff any more." "No," said Ben, turning back again. "That's all worn out." "Well, you must go to sleep," said Polly, "or Mammy'll be up here. And Fronzy hasn't had her breakfast either." Fronzy was wailing away dismally, sitting up in the middle of the old bed. Her face pricked, she said, and she was rubbing it vigorously with both fat little hands, and then crying worse than ever. "Oh, me! Oh, my!" cried Polly. "How you look, Fronzy!" "I want my Mammy," cried poor Fronzy. "Mammy can't come now, Fronzy dear. She's sewing. See what Polly's got for you. Butter. Isn't that splendid?" Fronzy stopped for just one moment and took a mouthful, but the toast was hard and dry, and she cried harder than before. "Now," said Polly, curling up on the bed beside her, "if you'll stop crying, Fronzy Pepper, I'll tell you about the cunningest, yes, the very cunningest little chickens you ever saw. One was white, and he looked just like this," said Polly, tumbling over on the bed in a heap. "He couldn't stand up straight. He was so fat." "Did he bite?" asked Fronzy, full of interest. "No, he didn't bite me," said Polly, "but his mother put a bug in his mouth, just as I'm doing, you know," and she broke off a small piece of the toast, put on a generous bit of butter, and held it over Fronzy's mouth. "Did he swallow it?" asked the child, obediently opening her little red lips. "Oh, snapped it," answered Polly. "Quick as ever he could, I tell you. But 'twasn't good like this, Fronzy. Did he have 2 bugs? Asked Fronzy, eyeing suspiciously the second morsel of dry toast that Polly was conveying to her mouth. Well, he would have had, replied Polly, if there'd been bugs enough, but there were 9 other chicks, Fronzy. Poor chickies, said Fronzy, and looked lovingly at the rest of the toast and butter on the plate, and while Polly fed it to her, listened with absorbed interest to all the particulars concerning each and every chick in the Henderson hen coop. Mother, said Polly, towards evening, I'm going to sit up with Ben tonight. Say I may. Do, Mother. Oh, no, you can't, replied Mrs. Pepper. You'll get worn out, and then what shall I do? Joel can hand him his medicine. Oh, Joe would tumble to sleep, Mammy, said Polly. The first thing, let me. Perhaps Fronzy'll let me go tonight, said Mrs. Pepper, reflectively. Oh, no, she won't, I know, replied Polly, decisively. She wants you all the time. I will, Polly, said Davy, coming in with an armful of wood, in time to hear the conversation. I'll give him his medicine, mayn't I, Mammy? And David let down his load and came over where his mother and Polly sat sewing to urge his rights. I don't know, said his mother, smiling on him. Can you, do you think? Yes, ma'am, said Davy, straightening himself up. When they told Ben, he said he knew a better way than for Davy to watch. He'd have a string tied to Davy's arm, and the end he'd hold in bed, and when 'twas time for medicine, he'd pull the string, and that would wake Davy up. Polly didn't sleep much more on her shakedown on the floor than if she had watched with Ben, for Fronzy cried and moaned and wanted a drink of water every 2 minutes, it seemed to her. As she went back into her nest after one of these travels, Polly thought, well, I don't care, if nobody else gets sick, if Ben'll only get well. Tomorrow I'm going to do Mammy's sack she's begun for Mr. Jackson. It's all plain sewing, just like a bag, and I can do it, I know. And so she fell into a troubled sleep, only to be awakened by Fronzy's fretful little voice. I want a drink of water, Polly, I do. Don't she drink awfully, Mammy? Asked Polly, after one of these excursions out to the kitchen after the necessary draught. Yes, said Mrs. Pepper, and she mustn't have any more. 'Twill hurt her. But Fronzy fell into a delicious sleep after that, and didn't want any more, luckily. Here, Joe, said Mrs. Pepper the next morning, take this coat up to Mr. Peters's, and be sure you get the money for it. How'll I get it? Asked Joe, who didn't relish the long, hot walk. Why, tell 'em we're sick. Ben's sick, added Mrs. Pepper, as the most decisive thing, and we must have it, and then wait for it. 'Tisn't pleasant up at the Peters's, grumbled Joel, taking the parcel and moving slowly off. No, no, Polly, said Mrs. Pepper. You needn't do that. Seeing Polly take up some sewing after doing up the room and finishing the semi-weekly bake. You're all beat out with that tussle over the stove. That sack'll have to go till next week. It can't, Mammy, said Polly, snipping off a basting thread. We've got to have the money. How much'll he give you for it? 30 cents, replied Mrs. Pepper. Well, said Polly, we've got to get all the 30 centses we can, Mammy dear, and I know I can do it, truly. Try me once, she implored. Well, Mrs. Pepper relented, slowly. Don't feel bad, Mammy dear, comforted Polly, sewing away briskly. Ben'll get well pretty soon, and then we'll be all right. Maybe, said Mrs. Pepper, and went back to Fronzy, who could scarcely let her out of her sight. Polly stitched away bravely. Now, if I do this good, Mammy'll let me do it other times, she said to herself. Davy, too, worked patiently out of doors, trying to do Ben's chores. The little fellow blundered over things that Ben would have accomplished in half the time, and he had to sit down often on the steps of the little old shed where the tools were kept, to wipe his hot face and rest. Polly, said Mrs. Pepper, hadn't you better stop a little? Dear me, how fast you sew, child. Polly gave a delighted little hum at her mother's evident approval. I'm going to do 'em all next week, Mammy, she said. Then Mr. Atkins won't take 'em away from us, I guess. Mr. Atkins kept the store and gave out coats and sacks of coarse linen and homespun to Mrs. Pepper to make, and it was the fear of losing the work that had made the mother's heart sink. I don't believe anybody's got such children as I have, she said, and she gave Polly a motherly little pat that the little daughter felt clear to the tips of her toes with a thrill of delight. About 2:30, long after dinner, Joe came walking in, hungry as a beaver, but flushed and triumphant. "Why, where have you been all this time?" asked his mother. "Oh, Joe, you didn't stop to play?" asked Polly, from her perch where she sat sewing, giving him a reproachful glance. "Stop to play," retorted Joe indignantly. "No, I guess I didn't. I've been to old Peters's." "Not all this time," exclaimed Mrs. Pepper. "Yes, I have too," replied Joel, sturdily marching up to her. "And there's your money, Mother." And he counted out $0.25 in silver pieces and pennies, which he took from a dingy wad of paper stowed away in the depths of his pocket. "Oh, Joe," said Mrs. Pepper, sinking back in her chair and looking at him. "What do you mean?" Polly put her work in her lap and waited to hear. "Where's my dinner, Polly?" asked Joel. "I hope it's a big one." "Yes, 'tis," said Polly. "You've got lots today. It's in the corner of the cupboard, covered up with the plate. So tell on, Joe." "That's elegant," said Joel, coming back with the well-filled plate, Ben's and his own share. "Do tell us, Joey," implored Polly. "Mother's waiting." "Well," said Joel, his mouth half full, "I waited, and he said the coat was all right. And Mrs. Peters said 'twas all right. And Mirandy Peters said 'twas all right, but they didn't any of 'em say anything about paying, so I didn't think 'twas all right. And can't I have some more butter, Polly?" "No," said Polly, sorry to refuse him. He'd been so good about the money. "The butter's got to be saved for Ben and Fronzy." "Oh," said Joe, "I wish Miss Henderson would send us some more. I do." "I think she might." "For shame, Joe," said Mrs. Pepper. "She was very good to send this, I think. Now what else did you say?" she asked. "Well," said Joel, taking another mouthful of bread, "so I waited. You told me to, Mother, you know, and they all went to work, and they didn't mind me at all, and there wasn't anything to look at, so I sat and sat. Polly, can't I have some gingerbread?" "No," said Polly, "it's all gone. I gave the last piece to Fronzy the day she was taken sick." "Oh, dear," said Joel, "everything's gone." "Well, do go on, Joe, do." "And then they had dinner, and Mr. Peters said, 'Hasn't that boy gone home yet?' And Mrs. Peters said, 'No,' and he called me in and asked me why I didn't run along home, and I said, 'Fronzy was sick, and Ben had the squeezels.'" "The what?" said Polly. "The squeezels," repeated Joel irritably. "That's what you said." "It's measles, Joey," corrected Mrs. Pepper. "Never mind, I wouldn't feel bad." "Well, they all laughed, and then I said you told me to wait till I did get the money." "Oh, Joe," began Mrs. Pepper, "you shouldn't have told him so. What did he say?" "Well, he laughed and said I was a smart boy, and he'd see. And Mirandy said, 'Do pay him, Pa, he must be tired to death.' And don't you think, he went to a big desk in the corner and took out a box, and 'twas full most of money. Lots! Oh, and he gave me mine, and that's all, and I'm tired to death." And Joel flung himself down on the floor, expanded his legs as only Joel could, and took a comfortable roll. "So you must be," said Polly, pityingly, "waiting at those Peterses." "Don't ever want to see any more Peterses," said Joel. "Never, never, never." "Oh, dear," thought Polly, as she sewed on into the afternoon. "I wonder what does all my eyes. Feels just like sand in 'em." And she rubbed and rubbed to thread her needle. But she was afraid her mother would see, so she kept at her sewing. Once in a while the bad feeling would go away, and then she would forget all about it. "There now, who says I can't do it? That's most done," she cried, jumping up and spinning across the room to stretch herself a bit. "And tomorrow I'll finish it." "Well," said Mrs. Pepper, "if you can do that, Polly, you'll be the greatest help I've had yet." So Polly tucked herself into the old shakedown with a thankful heart that night, hoping for morning. Alas, when morning did come, Polly could hardly move. The measles. What should she do? A faint hope of driving them off made her tumble out of bed and stagger across the room to look in the old cracked looking-glass. All hope was gone as the red reflection met her gaze. Polly was on the sick list now. "I won't be sick," she said. "At any rate, I'll keep around." An awful feeling made her clutch the back of a chair, but she managed somehow to get into her clothes and go groping blindly into the kitchen. Somehow, Polly couldn't see very well. She tried to set the table, but 'twas no use. "Oh dear," she thought. "Whatever'll Mammy do?" "Hello," said Joel, coming in. "What's the matter, Polly?" Polly started at his sudden entrance and, wavering a minute, fell over in a heap. "Oh, Ma! Ma!" screamed Joel, running to the foot of the stairs leading to the loft where Mrs. Pepper was with Ben. "Something's taken Polly, and she fell, and I guess she's in the woodbox." Hard days for Polly. "Ma," said David, coming softly into the bedroom, where poor Polly lay on the bed with Fronzy, her eyes bandaged with a soft old handkerchief. "I'll set the table." "There isn't any table to set," said Mrs. Pepper, sadly. "There isn't anybody to eat anything, Davy. You and Joel can get something out of the cupboard." "Can we get whatever we've a mind to, Ma?" cried Joel, who followed Davy, rubbing his face with a towel after his morning ablutions. "Yes," replied his mother, absently. "Come on, Dave," cried Joel. "We'll have a breakfast." "We mustn't," said little Davy, doubtfully. "Eat the whole, Joey." But that individual already had his head in the cupboard, which soon engrossed them both. Dr. Fisher was called in the middle of the morning to see what was the matter with Polly's eyes. The little man looked at her keenly over his spectacles. Then he said, "When were you taken?" "This morning," answered Polly, her eyes smarting. "Didn't you feel badly before?" questioned the doctor. Polly thought back, and then she remembered that she had felt very badly, that when she was baking over the old stove the day before, her back had ached dreadfully, and that somehow, when she sat down to sew, it didn't stop. Only her eyes had bothered her so. She didn't mind her back so much. "I thought so," said the doctor, when Polly answered. "And those eyes of yours have been used too much. What has she been doing, ma'am?" He turned around sharply on Mrs. Pepper as he asked this. "Sewing," said Mrs. Pepper, "and everything. Polly does everything, sir." "Humph," said the doctor. "Well, she won't again in one spell. Her eyes are very bad." At this, a whoop, small but terrible to hear, came from the middle of the bed, and Fronzy sat bolt upright. Everybody started, while Fronzy broke out, "Don't make my Polly sick. Oh, please don't." "Hey," said the doctor, and he looked kindly at the small object with a very red face in the middle of the bed. Then he added gently, "We're going to make Polly well, little girl, so that she can see splendidly." "Will you, really?" asked the child doubtfully. "Yes," said the doctor. "We'll try hard, and you mustn't cry, 'cause then Polly'll cry, and that will make her eyes very bad. Very bad indeed," he repeated impressively. "I won't cry," said Fronzy. "No, not one bit." And she wiped off the last tear with her fat little hand and watched to see what next was to be done. And Polly was left, very rebellious indeed, in the big bed, with a cooling lotion on the poor eyes that somehow didn't cool them one bit. "If 'twas anything but my eyes, Mammy, I could stand it," she bewailed, flouncing over and over in her impatience. "And who'll do all the work now?" "Don't think of the work, Polly," said Mrs. Pepper. "I can't do anything but think," said poor Polly. Just at that moment a queer noise out in the kitchen was heard. "Do go out, mother, and see what 'tis," said Polly. "I've come," said a cracked voice, close up by the bedroom door, followed by a big black cap, which could belong to no other than Grandma Baskam. "To set by you a spell. What's the matter?" she asked, and stopped, amazed to see Polly in bed. "Oh, Polly's taken!" screamed Mrs. Pepper in her ear. "Taken?" repeated the old lady. "What is it? A fit?" "No," said Mrs. Pepper. "The same as Ben's got, and Fronzy, the measles." "The measles, has she?" said Grandma. "Well, that's bad. And Ben's away, you say." "No, he isn't either," screamed Mrs. Pepper. "He's got them too." "Got two what?" asked Grandma. "Measles. He's got the measles too," repeated Mrs. Pepper, loud as she could, so loud that the old lady's cap trembled at the noise. "Oh, the dreadful," said Grandma. "And this girl too?" laying her hand on Phronsy's head. "Yes," said Mrs. Pepper, feeling it a little relief to tell over her miseries. "All three of them." "I haven't," said Joel, coming in hopes that Grandma had a stray peppermint or two in her pocket, as she sometimes did. "And I'm not going to either." "Oh, dear," groaned his mother. "That's what Polly said, and she's got 'em bad. It's her eyes," she screamed to Grandma, who looked inquiringly. "Her eyes, is it?" asked Mrs. Baskam. "Well, I've got a receipt that Cousin Samanthy's folks had when John's children had 'em, and I'll run right along home and get it," and she started to go. "No, you needn't," screamed Mrs. Pepper. "Thank you, Mrs. Baskam, but Dr. Fisher's been here, and he put something on Polly's eyes, and he said it mustn't be touched." "Hey," said the old lady. So Mrs. Pepper had to go all over it again, till at last she made her understand that Polly's eyes were taken care of, and they must wait for time to do the rest. "You come along of me?" whispered Grandma, when at last her call was done, to Joel, who stood by the door. "I've got some peppermints to home. I forgot to bring 'em." "Yes'm," said Joel, brightening up. "Where you going, Joe?" asked Mrs. Pepper, seeing him move off with Mrs. Bascom. "I may want you." "Oh, I've got to go over to Grandma's," said Joel briskly. "She wants me." "Well, don't be gone long then," replied his mother. "There," said Grandma, going into her keeping room to an old-fashioned chest of drawers. Opening one, she took therefrom a paper from which she shook out before Joe's delighted eyes some red and white peppermint drops. "There now, you take these home. You may have some, but be sure you give the most to the sick ones, and let Polly have the biggest." "She won't take 'em," said Joel, wishing he had the measles. "Well, you try her," said Grandma. "Run along now." But it was useless to tell Joel that, for he was halfway home already. He carried out Grandma's wishes and distributed conscientiously the precious drops. But when he came to Polly, she didn't answer, and looking at her in surprise, he saw two big tears rolling out under the bandage and wetting the pillow. "I don't want 'em, Joe," said Polly, when he made her understand that 'twas peppermints, real peppermints. "You may have 'em." "Try one, Polly. They're real good," said Joel, who had an undefined wish to comfort. "There, open your mouth." So Polly opened her mouth, and Joel put one in with satisfaction. "Isn't it good?" he asked, watching her crunch it. "Yes," said Polly, "real good. Where'd you get 'em?" "Over to Grandma Bascom's," said Joel. "She gave me lots for all of us. Have another, Polly." "No," said Polly, "not yet. You put two on my pillow where I can reach 'em, and then you keep the rest, Joel." "I'll put three," said Joel, counting out one red and two white ones and laying them on the pillow. "There." "And I want another, Joey. I do," said Phronsie from the other side of the bed. "Well, you may have one," said Joel. "A red one, Phronsie. Yes, you may have two. Now come on, Dave. We'll have the rest out by the woodpile." How they ever got through that day, I don't know. But late in the afternoon, carriage wheels were heard, and then they stopped right at the Peppers' little brown gate. "Polly," said Mrs. Pepper, running to the bedroom door, "it's Mrs. Henderson." "Is it?" said Polly from the darkened room. "Oh, I'm so glad. Is Miss Jerusha with her?" she asked fearfully. "No," said Mrs. Pepper, going back to ascertain. "Why, it's the parson himself. Dearie, how we look." "Never mind, Mammy," called back Polly, longing to spring out of bed and fix up a bit. "I'm sorry to hear the children are sick," said Mrs. Henderson, coming in her sweet, gentle way. "We didn't know it," said the minister, "until this morning. Can we see them?" "Oh, yes, sir," said Mrs. Pepper. "Ben's upstairs, and Polly and Phronsie are in here." "Poor little things," said Mrs. Henderson compassionately. "Hadn't you better," turning to the minister, "go up and see Ben first, while I will visit the little girls?" So the minister mounted the crooked stairs, and Mrs. Henderson went straight up to Polly's side. And the first thing Polly knew, a cool, gentle hand was laid on her hot head, and a voice said, "I've come to see my little chicken now." "Oh, ma'am," said Polly, bursting into a sob. "I don't care about my eyes, only Mammy," and she broke right down. "I know," said the minister's wife soothingly, "but it's for you to bear patiently, Polly. What do you suppose the chicks were doing when I came away?" And Mrs. Henderson, while she held Polly's hand, smiled and nodded encouragingly to Fronzy, who was staring at her from the other side of the bed. "I don't know, ma'am," said Polly. "Please tell us." "Well, they were all fighting over a grasshopper. Yes, 10 of them." "Which one got it?" asked Polly in intense interest. "Oh, I hope the white one did." "Well, he looked as much like winning as any of them," said the lady, laughing. "Bless her," thought Mrs. Pepper to herself, out in the kitchen, finishing the sack Polly had left. "She's a parson's wife, I say." And then the minister came down from Ben's room and went into the bedroom, and Mrs. Henderson went upstairs into the loft. "So," he said kindly, as after patting Phronsie head, he came over and sat down by Polly, "this is the little girl who came to see me when I was sick." "Oh, sir," said Polly, "I'm so glad you wasn't." "Well, when I come again," said Mr. Henderson, rising after a merry chat, "I see I shall have to slip a book into my pocket and read for those poor eyes." "Oh, thank you," cried Polly, and then she stopped and blushed. "Well, what is it?" asked the minister encouragingly. "Ben loves to hear reading," said Polly. "Does he? Well, by that time, my little girl, I guess Ben will be downstairs. He's all right, Polly. Don't you worry about him. And I'll sit in the kitchen by the bedroom door, and you can hear nicely." So the Hendersons went away. But somehow, before they went, a good many things found their way out of the old-fashioned chaise into the Peppers' little kitchen. But Polly's eyes didn't get any better, with all the care, and the lines of worry on Mrs. Pepper's face grew deeper and deeper. At last, she just confronted Dr. Fisher in the kitchen one day after his visit to Polly, and boldly asked him if they ever could be cured. "I know and there isn't any use keeping it from me," said the poor woman. "She's going to be stone blind." "My good woman," Dr. Fisher's voice was very gentle, and he took the hard brown hand in his own. "Your little girl will not be blind. I tell you the truth, but it will take some time to make her eyes quite strong. Time and rest. She has strained them in some way, but she will come out of it." "Praise the Lord," cried Mrs. Pepper, throwing her apron over her head, and then she sobbed on, "And thank you, sir. I can't ever thank you, for if Polly was blind, we might as well give up." The next day, Fronzy, who had the doctor's permission to sit up, only she was to be kept from taking cold, scampered around in stocking feet in search of her shoes, which she hadn't seen since she was first taken sick. "Oh, I want on my very best shoes," she cried. "Can't I, Mammy?" "Oh, no, Phronsie, you must keep them nice," remonstrated her mother. "You can't wear 'em every day, you know." "'Tisn't every day," said Phronsie slowly. "It's only one day." "Well, and then you'll want 'em on again tomorrow," said her mother. "Oh, no, I won't," cried Phronsie. "Never, no more tomorrow, if I can have 'em today. Please, Mammy dear." Mrs. Pepper went to the lowest drawer in the high bureau and took therefrom a small parcel done up in white tissue paper. Slowly unrolling this before the delighted eyes of the child, who stood patiently waiting, she disclosed the precious red-topped shoes, which Phronsie immediately clasped to her bosom. "My own, very own shoes. Whole mine," she cried, and trudged out into the kitchen to put them on herself. "Hello!" cried Dr. Fisher, coming in about a quarter of an hour later to find her tugging laboriously at the buttons. "New shoes, I declare!" "My own," cried Phronsie, sticking out one foot for inspection, where every button was in the wrong buttonhole. "And they've got red tops, too." "So they have," said the doctor, getting down on the floor beside her. "Beautiful red tops, aren't they?" "Beautiful," sang the child delightedly. "Does Polly have new shoes every day?" asked the doctor in a low voice, pretending to examine the other foot. Fronzy opened her eyes very wide at this. Oh no, she don't have anything. Polly don't. And what does Polly want most of all? Do you know? See if you can tell me. And the doctor put on the most alluring expression that he could muster. Oh, I know, cried Fronzy, with a very wise look. There now, cried the doctor, you're the girl for me, to think you know. So, what is it? Fronzy got up very gravely, and with one shoe half on, she leaned over and whispered in the doctor's ear, A stove. A what? Said the doctor, looking at her, and then at the old black thing in the corner that looked as if it were ashamed of itself. Why, she's got one. Oh, said the child, it won't burn, and sometimes Polly cries, she does, when she's all alone, and I see her. Now, said the doctor, very sympathetically, that's too bad, that is. And then what does she do? Oh, Ben stuffs it up, said the child, laughing. And so does Polly, too, with paper, and then it all tumbles out quick. Oh, just as quick. And Fronzy shook her yellow head at the dismal remembrance. Do you suppose, said the doctor, getting up, that you know of any smart little girl around here, about 4 years old, and that knows how to button on her own red-topped shoes, that would like to go to ride tomorrow morning in my carriage with me? Oh, I do, cried Fronzy, hopping on one toe. It's me. Very well, then, said Dr. Fisher, going to the bedroom door. We'll look out for tomorrow, then. To poor Polly, lying in the darkened room or sitting up in the big rocking chair, for Polly wasn't really very sick in other respects, the disease having all gone into the merry brown eyes, the time seemed interminable. Not to do anything. The very idea at any time would have filled her active, wide-awake little body with horror. And now, here she was. Oh dear, I can't bear it, she said, when she knew by the noise in the kitchen that everybody was out there, so nobody heard except a fat, old black spider in the corner, and he didn't tell anyone. I know it's a week, she said, since dinner time. If Ben were only well, to talk to me. Oh, I say, Polly, screamed Joel at that moment, running in. Ben's a-coming down the stairs. Stop, Joe, said Mrs. Pepper. You shouldn't have told. He wanted to surprise Polly. Oh, is he? Cried Polly, clasping her hands in rapture. Mammy, can't I take off this horrid bandage and see him? Dear me, no, said Mrs. Pepper, springing forward. Not for the world, Polly. Dr. Fisher'd have our ears off. Well, I can hear anyway, said Polly, resigning herself to the remaining comfort. Here he is. Oh, Ben. There, said Ben, grasping Polly, bandage and all. Now we're all right. And say, Polly, you're a brick. Mammy told me not to say that the other day, said Joel with a very virtuous air. Can't help it, said Ben, who was a little wild over Polly, and besides, he had been sick himself and had borne a good deal too. Now, said Mrs. Pepper, after the first excitement was over, you're so comfortable together, and Fronzy don't want me now. I'll go to the store. I must get some more work if Mr. Atkins'll give it to me. I'll be all right now, Mammy. That Ben's here, cried Polly, settling back into her chair with Fronzy on the stool at her feet. I'm going to tell her stories, Ma, cried Ben, so you needn't worry about us. Isn't it funny, Ben, said Polly, as the gate clicked after the mother, to be sitting still and telling stories in the daytime? Rather funny, replied Ben. Well, do go on, said Joel, as usual, rolling on the floor in a dreadful hurry for the story to begin. Little David looked up quietly as he sat on Ben's other side, his hands clasped tight together, just as eager, though he said nothing. Well, once upon a time, began Ben delightfully, and launched into one of the stories that the children thought perfectly lovely. Oh, Bensie, cried Polly, entranced, as they listened with bated breath, however do you think of such nice things? I've had time enough to think, the last week, said Ben, laughing, to last a lifetime. Do go on, put in Joel, impatient at the delay. Don't hurry him so, said Polly reprovingly. He isn't strong. Ben, said David, drawing a long breath, his eyes very big. Did he really see a bear? No, said Ben. Oh, Where was I?" "Why, you said Tommy heard a noise," said Polly, "and he thought it was a bear." "Oh, yes," said Ben. "I remember. 'Twasn't a—" "Oh, make it a bear, Ben," cried Joel, terribly disappointed. "Don't let it be not a bear." "Why, I can't," said Ben. "'Twouldn't sound true." "Never mind. Make it sound true," insisted Joel. "You can make anything true." "Very well," said Ben, laughing. "I suppose I must." "Make it 2 bears, Ben," begged little Phronsie. "Oh, no, Phronsie, that's too much," cried Joel. "That'll spoil it. But make it a big bear, do, Ben, and have him bite him somewhere, and most kill him." "Oh, Joel!" cried Polly, while David's eyes got bigger than ever. So Ben drew upon his powers as storyteller to suit his exacting audience, and was making his bear work havoc upon poor Tommy in a way captivating to all, even Joel, when— "Well, I declare," sounded Mrs. Pepper's cheery voice coming in upon them, "if this isn't comfortable." "Oh, Mammy!" cried Phronsie, jumping out of Polly's arms, whither she had taken refuge during the thrilling tale, and running to her mother, who gathered her baby up. "We've had a bear, a real, live bear we have. Ben made him." "Have you?" said Mrs. Pepper, taking off her shawl and laying her parcel of work down on the table. "Now, that's nice." "Oh, Mammy!" cried Polly. "It does seem so good to be all together again." "And I thank the Lord," said Mrs. Pepper, looking down on her happy little group, and the tears were in her eyes. "And children, we ought to be very good and please him, for he's been so good to us." The cloud over the little brown house. When Phronsie, with many crows of delight and much chattering, had gotten fairly started the following morning on her much-anticipated drive with the doctor, the whole family, excepting Polly, drawn up around the door to see them off, Mrs. Pepper resolved to snatch the time and run down for an hour or two to one of her customers who had long been waiting for a little tailoring to be done for her boys. "Now, Joel," she said, putting on her bonnet before the cracked looking-glass, "you stay along of Polly. Ben must go up to bed," the doctor said, "and Davy's going to the store for some molasses, so you and Polly must keep house." "Yes, said Joel. "May I have something to eat, Ma?" "Yes," said Mrs. Pepper, "but don't you eat the new bread. You may have as much as you want of the old." "Isn't there any molasses, Mammy?" asked Joel, as she bade Polly good-bye, and gave her numberless charges to be careful of your eyes, and not to let a crack of light in through the curtain, as the old green paper shade was called. "No, if you're very hungry, you can eat bread," said Mrs. Pepper, sensibly. "Joel," said Polly, after the mother had gone, "I do wish you could read to me." "Well, I can't," said Joel, glad he didn't know how. "I thought the minister was comin'." "Well, he was," said Polly, "but Mammy said he had to go out of town to a consequence." "A what?" asked Joel, very much impressed. "A con," repeated Polly. "Well, it began with a con, and I am sure, yes, very sure it was consequence." "That must be splendid," said Joel, coming up to her chair and slowly drawing a string he held in his hand back and forth. "To go to consequences and everything. When I'm a man, Polly Pepper, I'm going to be a minister and have a nice time and go just everywhere." "Oh, Joel!" exclaimed Polly, quite shocked. "You couldn't be one. You aren't good enough." "I don't care," said Joel, not at all dashed by her plainness. "I'll be good then, when I'm a big man. Don't you suppose, Polly," as a new idea struck him, "that Mr. Henderson ever is naughty?" "No," said Polly, very decidedly. "Never, never, never." "Then I don't want to be one," said Joel, veering round with a sigh of relief. "And besides, I'd rather have a pair of horses like Mr. Slocum's, and then I could go everywheres, I guess." "And sell tin?" asked Polly. "Just like Mr. Slocum?" "Yes," said Joel. "This is the way I'd go. Gee-wop! Gee-wo!" And Joel pranced with his imaginary steeds all around the room, making about as much noise as any other 4 boys, as he brought up occasionally against the 4-poster or the high old bureau. "Well," said a voice close up by Polly's chair that made her skip with apprehension, It was so like Miss Jerusha Henderson's. Joel was whooping away behind the bedstead to his horses that had become seriously entangled, so he didn't hear anything. But when Polly said bashfully, "I can't see anything, Ma'am," he came up red and shining to the surface and stared with all his might. "I came to see you, little girl," said Miss Jerusha severely, seating herself stiffly by Polly's side. "Thank you, Ma'am," said Polly faintly. "Who's this boy?" asked the lady, turning around squarely on Joel and eyeing him from head to foot. "He's my brother Joel," said Polly. Joel still stared. "Which brother?" pursued Miss Jerusha, like a census taker. "He is next to me," said Polly, wishing her mother was home. "He's 9, Joel is." "He's big enough to do something to help his mother," said Miss Jerusha, looking him through and through. "Don't you think you might do something when the others are sick and your poor mother is working so hard?" she continued, in a cold voice. "I do something," blurted out Joel sturdily. "Lots and lots." "You shouldn't say lots," reproved Miss Jerusha, with a sharp look over her spectacles. "'Tisn't proper for boys to talk so. What do you do all day long?" she asked, turning back to Polly after a withering glance at Joel, who still stared. "I can't do anything, Ma'am," replied Polly sadly. "I can't see to do anything." "Well, you might knit, I should think," said her visitor. "It's dreadful for a girl as big as you are to sit all day idle. I had sore eyes once when I was a little girl. How old are you?" she asked abruptly. 11 last month," said Polly. "Well, I wasn't only 9 when I knit a stocking, and I had sore eyes too. You see, I was a very little girl, and—" "Was you ever little?" interrupted Joel in extreme incredulity, drawing near and looking over the big square figure. "Hey?" said Miss Jerusha, so Joel repeated his question before Polly could stop him. "Of course," answered Miss Jerusha, and then she added tartly, "Little boys shouldn't speak unless they're spoken to. Now," and she turned back to Polly again, "didn't you ever knit a stocking?" "No, Ma'am," said Polly, "not a whole one." "Dear me," exclaimed Miss Jerusha, "did I ever?" And she raised her black mitts in intense disdain. "A big girl like you, never to knit a stocking, to think your mother should bring you up so, and—" "She didn't bring us up," screamed Joel, in indignation, facing her with blazing eyes. "Joel," said Polly, "be still." "And you're very impertinent too," said Miss Jerusha. "A good child never is impertinent." Polly sat quite still, and Miss Jerusha continued, "Now, I hope you will learn to be industrious, and when I come again, I will see what you have done." "You aren't ever coming again," said Joel defiantly. "No, never." "Joel," implored Polly, and in her distress she pulled up her bandage as she looked at him. "You know Mammy'll be so sorry at you." "Oh, ma'am," and she turned to Miss Jerusha, who was now thoroughly aroused to the duty she saw before her of doing these children good. "I don't know what is the reason, ma'am. Joel never talks so. He's real good, and—" "It only shows," said the lady, seeing her way quite clear for a little exhortation, "that you've all had your own way from infancy, and that you don't do what you might to make your mother's life a happy one." "Oh, ma'am," cried Polly, and she burst into a flood of tears. "Please, please don't say that." "And I say," screamed Joel, stamping his small foot, "if you make Polly cry, you'll kill her. Don't, Polly, don't." And the boy put both arms around her neck and soothed and comforted her in every way he could think of. And Miss Jerusha, seeing no way to make herself heard, disappeared, feeling pity for children who would turn away from good advice. But still Polly cried on. All the pent-up feelings that had been so long controlled had free vent now. She really couldn't stop. Joel, frightened to death, at last said, "I'm going to wake up Ben." That brought Polly to, and she sobbed out, "Oh no, Joe, I'll stop." "I will," said Joel, seeing his advantage. "I'm going, Polly," and he started to the foot of the stairs. "No, I'm done now, Joe," said Polly, wiping her eyes and choking back her thoughts. "Oh, Joe, I must scream. My eyes ache so." And poor Polly fairly writhed all over the chair. "What'll I do?" said Joel, at his wits' end, running back. "Do you want some water?" "Oh, no," gasped Polly. "Doctor wouldn't let me. Oh, I wish Mammy'd come." "I'll go and look for her," suggested Joel, feeling as if he must do something, and he'd rather be out at the gate than to see Polly suffer. "That won't bring her," said Polly, trying to keep still. "I'll try to wait." "Here she is now," cried Joel, peeping out of the window. "Oh, goody!" Joel's turn. "Well?" Mrs. Pepper's tone was unusually blithe as she stepped into the kitchen. "You've had a nice time, I suppose." "What in the world?" And she stopped at the bedroom door. "Oh, Mammy, if you'd been here," said Joel, while Polly sat still, only holding on to her eyes as if they were going to fly out. "There's been a big woman here. She came right in, and she talked awfully. And Polly's been a-crying, and her eyes ache dreadfully, and—" "Been crying," repeated Mrs. Pepper, coming up to poor Polly. "Polly been crying," she still repeated. "Oh, Mammy, I couldn't help it," said Polly. "She said—" And in spite of all she could do, the rain of tears began again, which bade fair to be as uncontrolled as before. But Mrs. Pepper took her up firmly in her arms as if she were Fronzy, and sat down in the old rocking chair and just patted her back. "There, there," she whispered soothingly. "Don't think of it, Polly. Mother's got home." "Oh, Mammy," said Polly, crawling up to the comfortable neck for protection. "I ought not to mind, but 'twas Miss Jerusha Henderson, and she said—" "What did she say?" asked Mrs. Pepper, thinking perhaps it to be the wiser thing to let Polly free her mind. "Oh, she said that we ought to be doing something, and I ought to knit, and—" "Go on," said her mother. "And then Joel got naughty." "Oh, Mammy, he never did so before, and I couldn't stop him," cried Polly, in great distress. "I really couldn't, Mammy, and he talked to her, and he told her she wasn't ever coming here again." "Joel shouldn't have said that," said Mrs. Pepper, and under her breath something was added that Polly even failed to hear. "But no more she isn't." "And Mammy," cried Polly, and she flung her arms around her mother's neck and gave her a grasp that nearly choked Mrs. Pepper. "Ain't I helping you some, Mammy? Oh, I wish I could do something big for you. Ain't you happy, Mammy?" "For the land's sakes," cried Mrs. Pepper, straining Polly to her heart. "Whatever has that woman? Whatever could she have said to you? Such a girl as you are, too," cried Mrs. Pepper, hugging Polly and covering her with kisses so tender that Polly, warmed and cuddled up to her heart's content, was comforted to the full. "Well," said Mrs. Pepper, when at last she thought she had formed between Polly and Joel about the right idea of the visit, "well, now we won't think of it, ever any more. 'Tisn't worth it, Polly, you know." But poor Polly, and poor Mother, they both were obliged to think of it. Nothing could avert the suffering of the next few days, caused by that long flow of burning tears. "Nothing feels good on 'em, Mammy," said Polly at last, twisting her hands in the vain attempt to keep from rubbing the aching, inflamed eyes that drove her nearly wild with their itching. "There isn't any use in trying anything." "There will be use," energetically protested Mrs. Pepper, bringing another cool bandage. "As long as you've got an eye in your head, Polly Pepper." Dr. Fisher's face, when he first saw the change that the fateful visit had wrought and heard the accounts, was very grave indeed. Everything had been so encouraging on his last visit that he had come very near promising Polly speedy freedom from the hateful bandage. But the little Pepper household soon had something else to think of more important even than Polly's eyes, for now the heartiest, the jolliest of all the little group was down. Joel. How he fell sick, they scarcely knew. It all came so suddenly. The poor, bewildered family had hardly time to think before delirium and perhaps death stared them in the face. When Polly first heard it, by Phronsy's pattering downstairs and screaming, "Oh, Polly, Joey's drayadful sick, he is!" she jumped right up and tore off the bandage. "Now, I will help Mother. I will, so there." And in another minute she would have been up in the sick room. But the first thing she knew, a gentle but firm hand was laid upon hers, and she found herself back again in the old rocking chair, and listening to the doctor's words, which were quite stern and decisive. Now I tell you, he said, you must not take off that bandage again. Do you know the consequences? You will be blind, and then you will be a care to your mother all your life. I shall be blind anyway, said Polly despairingly, so 'twon't make any difference. No, your eyes will come out of it all right, only I did hope, and the good doctor's face fell, that the other two boys would escape, but, and he brightened up at sight of Polly's forlorn visage, see you do your part by keeping still. But there came a day soon when everything was still around the once happy little brown house, when only whispers were heard from white lips and thoughts were fearfully left unuttered. On the morning of one of these days, when Mrs. Pepper felt she could not exist an hour longer without sleep, kind Mrs. Beebe came to stay until things were either better or worse. Still the cloud hovered, dark and forbidding. At last, one afternoon, when Polly was all alone, she could endure it no longer. She flung herself down by the side of the old bed and buried her face in the gay-patched bedquilt. Dear God, she said, make me willing to have anything, she hesitated. Yes, anything happen. To be blind forever and to have Joey sick only make me good. How long she stayed there she never knew, for she fell asleep, the first sleep she had had since Joey was taken sick, and little Mrs. Beebe, coming in, found her thus. Polly, the good woman said, leaning over her, you poor pretty creature, you. I'm going to tell you something. There, just to think. Joel's going to get well. Oh, Mrs. Beebe, cried Polly, tumbling over in a heap on the floor, her face, as much as could be seen under the bandage, in a perfect glow. Is he, really? Yes, to be sure. The danger's all over now, said the little old lady, inwardly thinking. If I hadn't a come. Well then, the Lord wants him to, cried Polly, in rapture. Don't he, Mrs. Beebe? To be sure, repeated the kind friend, only half understanding. Well, I don't care about my eyes then, cried Polly, and to Mrs. Beebe's intense astonishment and dismay, she spun round and round in the middle of the floor. Oh, Polly, Polly, the little old lady cried, running up to her, do stop. The doctor wouldn't let you. He wouldn't really, you know. It'll all go to your eyes. I don't care, repeated Polly, in the middle of a spin, but she stopped obediently. Seems as if I'd just as soon be blind as not. It's so beautiful Joey's going to get well. Sunshine again. But as Joel was smitten down suddenly, so he came up quickly, and his hearty nature asserted itself by rapid strides toward returning health, and one morning he astonished them all by turning over suddenly and exclaiming, I want something to eat. Bless the Lord, cried Mrs. Pepper, now he's going to live. But he mustn't eat, protested Mrs. Beebe, in great alarm, trotting for the cup of gruel. Here, you pretty creature, you. Here's something nice. And she temptingly held the spoon over Joel's mouth, but with a grimace he turned away. Oh, I want something to eat. Some gingerbread or some bread and butter. Dear me, ejaculated Mrs. Beebe. Gingerbread. Poor Mrs. Pepper saw the hardest part of her trouble now before her, as she realized that the returning appetite must be fed only on strengthening food, for where it was to come from she couldn't tell. The Lord only knows where we'll get it, she groaned within herself. Yes, he knew. A rap at the door, and little David ran down to find the cause. Oh, Mammy, he said, Mrs. Henderson sent it. See. And in the greatest excitement he placed in her lap a basket that smelt savoury and nice even before it was opened. When it was opened, there lay a little bird delicately roasted and folded in a clean napkin. Also a glass of jelly, crimson and clear. Oh, Joey, cried Mrs. Pepper, almost overwhelmed with joy. See what Mrs. Henderson sent you. Now you can eat fit for a king. That little bird certainly performed its mission in life, for as Mrs. Beebe said, it just touched the spot, and from that very moment Joel improved so rapidly they could hardly believe their eyes. "Oh, I haven't been sick," he cried on the third day, true to his nature. "Mammy, I want to get up." "Oh dear, no, you mustn't, Joel," cried Mrs. Pepper in a fright, running up to him as he was preparing to give the bedclothes a lusty kick. "You'll send 'em in." "Send what in?" asked Joel, looking up at his mother in terror as the dreadful thought made him pause. "Why, the measles, Joey. They'll all go in if you get out." "How are they going to get in again, I'd like to know?" asked Joel, looking at the little red spots on his hands in incredulity. "Say, Ma." "Well, they will," said his mother, "as you'll find to your sorrow if you get out of bed." "Oh dear," said Joel, beginning to whimper as he drew into bed again. "When can I get up, Mammy?" "Oh, in a day or two," responded Mrs. Pepper, cheerfully. "You're getting on so finely you'll be as smart as a cricket. Shouldn't you say he might get up in a day or two, Mrs. Beebe?" She appealed to that individual who was knitting away cheerily in the corner. "Well, if he keeps on as he's begun, I shouldn't know what to think," replied Mrs. Beebe. "It beats all how quick he's picked up. I never see anything like it, I'm sure." And as Mrs. Beebe was a great authority in sickness, the old sunny cheeriness began to creep into the brown house once more and to bubble over as of yore. "Seems as if 'twas just good to live," said Mrs. Pepper, thankfully once, when her thoughts were too much for her. "I don't believe I shall ever care how poor we are," she continued, "as long as we're together." "And that's just what the Lord meant, maybe," replied good Mrs. Beebe, who was preparing to go home. Joel kept the house in a perfect uproar all through his getting well. Mrs. Pepper observed one day, when he had been more turbulent than usual, that she was almost worn to a thread. "'Twasn't anything to take care of you, Joe," she added, "when you were real sick, because then I knew where you were, but, well, you won't ever have the measles again, I suppose, and that's some comfort." Little David, who had been nearly stunned by the sickness that had laid aside his almost constant companion, could express his satisfaction and joy in no other way than by running every third minute and begging to do something for him. And Joel, who loved dearly to be waited on, improved every opportunity that offered, which Mrs. Pepper, observing, soon put a stop to. "You'll run his legs off, Joel," at last she said, when he sent David the third time down to the woodpile for a stick of just the exact thickness, and which the little messenger declared wasn't to be found. "Haven't you any mercy? You've kept him going all day, too," she added, glancing at David's pale face. "Oh, Mammy," panted David, "don't. I love to go." "Here, Joe, is the best I could find," handing him a nice smooth stick. "I know you do," said his mother, "but Joe's getting better now, and he must learn to spare you." "I don't want to spare folks," grumbled Joel, whittling away with energy. "I've been sick, real sick," he added, lifting his chubby face to his mother to impress the fact. "I know you have," she cried, running to kiss her boy. "But now, Joe, you're most well. Tomorrow I'm going to let you go downstairs. What do you think of that?" "Hooray!" screamed Joel, throwing away the stick and clapping his hands, forgetting all about his serious illness. "That'll be prime." "Aren't you too sick to go, Joey?" asked Mrs. Pepper mischievously. "No, I'm not sick," cried Joel in the greatest alarm, fearful his mother meant to take back the promise. "I've never been sick. Oh, Mammy, you know you'll let me go, won't you?" "I guess so," laughed his mother. "Come on, Fron," cried Joel, giving her a whirl. David, who was too tired for active sport, sat on the floor and watched them frolic in great delight. "Mammy," said he, edging up to her side as the sport went on, "do you know, I think it's just good. It's so frisky since Joe got well, isn't it, Mammy?" "Yes, indeed," said Mrs. Pepper, giving him a radiant look in return for his. "And when Polly's around again with her two eyes all right, well, I don't know what we shall do, I declare." "Boo!" cried a voice, next morning, close to Polly's elbow, unmistakably Joel's. "Oh, Joel Pepper!" she cried, whirling around. "Is that really you?" "Yes," cried that individual confidently. "It's I. Oh, I say, Polly, I've had fun upstairs, I tell you what." "Poor boy," said Polly compassionately. "I wasn't a poor boy," cried Joel indignantly. "I had splendid things to eat. Oh, my!" and he closed one eye and smacked his lips in the delightful memory. "I know it," said Polly, "and I'm so glad, Joel." "I don't suppose I'll ever get so many again," observed Joel reflectively after a minute's pause, as one and another of the wondrous delicacies rose before his mind's eye. "Not unless I have the measles again. Say, Polly, can't I have 'em again?" "Mercy, no," cried Polly, in intense alarm. "I hope not." "Well, I don't," said Joel. "I wish I could have 'em 60. No, 200 times. So there." "Well, Mammy couldn't take care of you," said Ben. "You don't know what you're saying, Joe." "Well, then, I wish I could have the things without the measles," said Joel, willing to accommodate. "Only folks won't send 'em," he added in an injured tone. "Polly's had the hardest time of all," said her mother, affectionately patting the bandage. "I think so too," put in Ben. "If my eyes were hurt, I'd give up." "So would I," said David, and Joel, to be in the fashion, cried also, "I know I would," while little Fronzy squeezed up to Polly's side, "and I too." "Would what, Puss?" asked Ben, tossing her up high. "Have good things," cried the child, in delight at understanding the others. "I would really, Ben," she cried, gravely, when they all screamed. "Well, I hope so," said Ben, tossing her higher yet. "Don't laugh at her, boys," put in Polly. "We're all going to have good times now, Phronsie, now we've got well." "Yes," laughed the child from her high perch. "We aren't ever going to be sick again, ever, any more," she added impressively. The good times were coming for Polly, coming pretty near, and she didn't know it. All the children were in the secret, for as Mrs. Pepper declared, they'd have to know it, and if they were let into the secret, they'd keep it better. So they had individually and collectively been entrusted with the precious secret and charged with the extreme importance of never letting anyone know, and they had been nearly bursting ever since with the wild desire to impart their knowledge. "I'm afraid I shall tell," said David, running to his mother at last. "Oh, Mammy, I don't dare stay near Polly. I do want to tell so bad." "Oh, no, you won't, David," said his mother encouragingly, "when you know Mother don't want you to. And besides, think how Polly'll look when she sees it." "I know," cried David in the greatest rapture. "I wouldn't tell for all the world. I guess she'll look nice, don't you, Mother?" And he laughed in glee at the thought. "Poor child, I guess she will." And then Mrs. Pepper laughed too, till the little old kitchen rang with delight at the accustomed sound. The children all had to play clap in and clap out in the bedroom while it came, and stagecoach, too. Anything to make a noise, Ben said. And then, after they got nicely started in the game, he would be missing to help about the mysterious thing in the kitchen, which was safe since Polly couldn't see him go on account of her bandage. So she didn't suspect in the least, and although the rest were almost dying to be out in the kitchen, they conscientiously stuck to their bargain to keep Polly occupied. Only Joel would open the door and peep once, and then Phronsie behind him began. "Oh, I see the But David swooped down on her in a twinkling and smothered the rest by tickling her. Once they came very near having the whole thing pop out. "Whatever is that noise in the kitchen?" asked Polly, as they all stopped to take breath after the scuffle of stagecoach. "It sounds just like grating." "I'll go and see," cried Joel promptly, and then he flew out where his mother and Ben and two men were at work on a big black thing in the corner. The old stove, strange to say, was nowhere to be seen. Something else stood in its place, a shiny black affair, with a generous supply of oven doors, and altogether such a comfortable, home-like look about it, as if it would say, "I'm going to make sunshine in this house." "Oh, Joel," cried his mother, turning around on him with very black hands, "you haven't told." "No," said Joel, "but she's hearing the noise, Polly is." "Hush," said Ben to one of the men. "We can't put it up without some noise," the man replied, "but we'll be as still as we can." "Isn't it a big one, Ma?" asked Joel, in the loudest of stage whispers that Polly on the other side of the door couldn't have failed to hear if Phronsie hadn't laughed just then. "Go back, Joe, do," said Ben. "Play tag, anything," he implored. "We'll be through in a few minutes." It takes forever, said Joel, disappearing within the bedroom door. Luckily for the secret, Fronzy just then ran a pin sticking up on the arm of the old chair into her finger, and Polly, while comforting her, forgot to question Joel. And then the mother came in, and though she had ill-concealed hilarity in her voice, she kept chattering and bustling around with Polly's supper to such an extent that there was no chance for a word to be got in. Next morning it seemed as if the little brown house would turn inside out with joy. "Oh, Mammy!" cried Polly, jumping into her arms the first thing, as Dr. Fisher untied the bandage. "My eyes are new, just the same as if I'd just got 'em. Don't they look different?" she asked earnestly, running to the cracked glass to see for herself. "No," said Ben. "I hope not. The same brown ones, Polly." "Well," said Polly, hugging first one and then another, "everybody looks different through them, anyway." "Oh!" cried Joel. "Come out into the kitchen, Polly. It's a great deal better out there." "May I?" asked Polly, who was in such a twitter looking at everything that she didn't know which way to turn. "Yes," said the doctor, smiling at her. "Well, then," sang Polly. "Come, Mammy, we'll go first. Isn't it just lovely? Oh, Mammy!" And Polly turned so very pale and looked as if she were going to tumble right over that Mrs. Pepper grasped her arm in dismay. "What is it?" she asked, pointing to the corner, while all the children stood round in the greatest excitement. "Why," cried Phronsie, "it's a stove. Don't you know, Polly?" But Polly gave one plunge across the room, and before anybody could think, she was down on her knees with her arms flung right around the big black thing, and laughing and crying over it, all in the same breath. And then they all took hold of hands and danced around it like wild little things, while Dr. Fisher stole out silently, and Mrs. Pepper laughed till she wiped her eyes to see them go. "We aren't ever going to have any more burnt bread," sang Polly, all out of breath. "Nor your back isn't going to break any more," panted Ben, with a very red face. "Hooray!" screamed Joel and David, to fill any pause that might occur, while Phronsie gurgled and laughed at everything just as it came along. And then they all danced and capered again, all but Polly, who was down before the precious stove examining and exploring into ovens and everything that belonged to it. "Oh, Ma," she announced, coming up to Mrs. Pepper, who had been obliged to fly to her sewing again and exhibiting a very crocky face and a pair of extremely smutty hands. "It's most all ovens, and it's just splendid." "I know it," answered her mother, delighted in the joy of her child. "My, how black you are, Polly." "Oh, I wish," cried Polly, as the thought struck her, "that Dr. Fisher could see it. Where did he go to, Ma?" "I guess Dr. Fisher has seen it before," said Mrs. Pepper, and then she began to laugh. "You haven't ever asked where the stove came from, Polly." And to be sure, Polly had been so overwhelmed that if the stove had really dropped from the clouds, it would have been small matter of astonishment to her as long as it had come. That was the main thing. "Mammy," said Polly, turning around slowly with the stove lifter in her hand, "did Dr. Fisher bring that stove?" "He didn't exactly bring it," answered her mother, "but I guess he knew something about it." "Oh, he's the splendidest, goodest man," cried Polly, "that ever breathed. Did he really get us that stove?" "Yes," said Mrs. Pepper. "He would. I couldn't stop him. I don't know how he found out you wanted one so bad, but he said it must be kept as a surprise when your eyes got well." "And he saved my eyes," cried Polly, full of gratitude. "I've got a stove and 2 new eyes, Mammy, just to think." "We ought to be good after all our mercies," said Mrs. Pepper thankfully, looking around on her little group. Joel was engaged in the pleasing occupation of seeing how far he could run his head into the biggest oven and then pulling it out to exhibit its blackness, thus engrossing the others in a perfect hubbub. "I'm going to bake my doctor some little cakes," declared Polly, when there was comparative quiet. "Do, Polly," cried Joel, "and then leave 1 or 2 over." "No," said Polly, "we can't have any, because these must be very nice. Mammy, can't I have some white on top, just once?" she pleaded. "I don't know," dubiously replied Mrs. Pepper. "Eggs are dreadful dear, and—" "I don't care," said Polly, recklessly. "I must just once for Dr. Fisher." I tell you, Polly, said Mrs. Pepper, what you might do. You might make him some little apple tarts. Most everyone likes them, you know. Well, said Polly with a sigh, I suppose they'll have to do, but sometime, Mammy, I'm going to bake him a big cake, so there. A threatened blow. One day, a few weeks after, Mrs. Pepper and Polly were busy in the kitchen. Fronzy was out in the orchard, as the one scraggy apple tree was called by courtesy, singing her rag doll to sleep under its sheltering branches. But Baby was cross and wouldn't go to sleep, and Fronzy was on the point of giving up and returning to the house when a strain of music made her pause with Dolly in her apron. There she stood with her finger in her mouth in utter astonishment, wondering where the sweet sounds came from. "Oh, Fronzy!" screamed Polly from the back door. "Where are— Oh, here, come quick! It's the boaty-fullest." "What is it?" eagerly asked the little one, hopping over the stubby grass, leaving poor discarded Baby on its snubby nose where it dropped in a hurry. "Oh, a monkey!" cried Polly. "Do hurry! The sweetest little monkey you ever saw." "What is a monkey?" asked Fronzy, scurrying after Polly to the gate where her mother was waiting for them. "Why, a monkey's a monkey," explained Polly. "I don't know any better than that. Here he is. Isn't he splendid?" And she lifted Fronzy up to the big post where she could see finely. "Oh, oh, ow!" screamed little Fronzy. "See him, Polly. Just see him." A man with an organ was standing in the middle of the road playing away with all his might, and at the end of a long rope was a lively little monkey in a bright red coat and a smart cocked hat. The little creature pulled off his hat, and with one long jump coming on the fence, he made Fronzy a most magnificent bow. Strange to say, the child wasn't in the least frightened, but put out her little fat hand, speaking in gentle tones. "Poor little monkey. Come here, poor little monkey." Turning up his little wrinkled face and glancing fearfully at his master, Jocko began to grimace and beg for something to eat. The man pulled the string and struck up a merry tune, and in a minute the monkey spun around and around at such a lively pace and put in so many queer antics that the little audience were fairly convulsed with laughter. "I can't pay you," said Mrs. Pepper, wiping her eyes, when at last the man pulled up the strap, whistling to Jocko to jump up. "But I'll give you something to eat, and the monkey too. He shall have something for his pains in amusing my children." The man looked very cross when she brought him out only brown bread and 2 cold potatoes. "Haven't you got nothing better than that?" "It's as good as we have," answered Mrs. Pepper. The man threw down the bread in the road, but Jocko thankfully ate his share, Polly and Fronzy busily feeding him, and then he turned and snapped up the portion his master had left in the dusty road. Then they moved on, Mrs. Pepper and Polly going back to their work in the kitchen. A little down the road the man struck up another tune. Fronzy, who had started merrily to tell Baby all about it, stopped a minute to hear, and she didn't go back to the orchard. About 2 hours after, Polly said merrily, "I'm going to call Fronzy in, Mammy. She must be awfully tired and hungry by this time." She sang gaily on the way, "I'm coming, Fronzy. Coming." "Why? Where?" Peeping under the tree. Baby lay on its face disconsolately on the ground, and the orchard was empty. Fronzy was gone. "It's no use," said Ben, to the distracted household and such of the neighbors as the news had brought hurriedly to the scene, "to look any more around here, but somebody must go toward Hingham. He'd be likely to go that way." "No one could tell where he would go," cried Polly, wringing her hands. "But he'd change, Ben, if he thought folks would think he'd gone there," said Mrs. Pepper. "We must go all roads," said Ben firmly. "One must take the stage to Boxville, and I'll take Deacon Brown's wagon on the Hingham Road, and somebody else must go to Toad Hollow." "I'll go in the stage," screamed Joel, who could scarcely see out of his eyes. He had cried so. "I'll find her. I know." "Be spry then, Joe, and catch it at the corner." Everybody soon knew that little Fronzy Pepper had gone off with a cross organ man and an awful monkey, and in the course of an hour dozens of people were out on the hot, dusty roads in search. "What's the matter?" asked a testy old gentleman in the stage, of Joel, who, in his anxiety to see both sides of the road at once, bobbed the old gentleman in the face so often as the stage lurched that at last he knocked his hat over his eyes. "My sister's gone off with a monkey," explained Joel, bobbing over to the other side, as he thought he caught sight of something pink that he felt sure must be Phronsy's apron. "Stop! Stop! There she is!" he roared, and the driver, who had his instructions and was fully in sympathy, pulled up so suddenly that the old gentleman flew over into the opposite seat. "Where?" But when they got up to it, Joel saw that it was only a bit of pink calico flapping on a clothesline. So he climbed back, and away they rumbled again. The others were having the same luck. No trace could be found of the child. To Ben, who took the Hingham Road, the minutes seemed like hours. "I won't go back," he muttered, "until I take her. I can't see Mother's face." But the 10 miles were nearly traversed. Almost the last hope was gone. Into every thicket and lurking place by the roadside had he peered, but no Fronzy. Deacon Brown's horse began to lag. "Go on," said Ben hoarsely. "Oh, dear Lord, make me find her." The hot sun poured down on the boy's face, and he had no cap. What cared he for that? On and on he went. Suddenly the horse stopped. Ben doubled up the reins to give him a cut, when, "Whoa!" he roared so loud that the horse, in very astonishment, gave a lurch that nearly flung him headlong. But he was over the wheel in a twinkling, and up with a bound to a small thicket of scrubby bushes on a high hill by the roadside. Here lay a little bundle on the ground, and close by it a big black dog, and over the whole, standing guard, was a boy a little bigger than Ben, with honest grey eyes. And the bundle was Fronzy. "Don't wake her up," said the boy warningly, as Ben, with a hungry look in his eyes, leaped up the hill. "She's tired to death." "She's my sister," cried Ben. "Our Fronzy." "I know it," said the boy kindly, "but I wouldn't wake her up yet if I were you. I'll tell you all about it." And he took Ben's hand, which was as cold as ice. "Safe." "It's all right, Prince," the boy added encouragingly to the big dog, who, lifting his noble head, had turned 2 big eyes steadily on Ben. "He's all right. Lie down again." Then, flinging himself down on the grass, he told Ben how he came to rescue Fronzy. "Prince and I were out for a stroll," said he. "I live over in Hingham," pointing to the pretty little town just a short distance before them in the hollow. "That is," laughing, "I do this summer." Well, we were out strolling along about a mile below here on the crossroad, and all of a sudden, just as if they sprung right up out of the ground, I saw a man with an organ, and a monkey, and a little girl coming along the road. She was crying, and as soon as Prince saw that, he gave a growl, and then the man saw us, and he looked so mean and cringing I knew there must be something wrong, and I inquired of him what he was doing with that little girl. And then she looked up and begged so with her eyes, and all of a sudden broke away from him and ran towards me screaming, "I want Polly." Well, the man sprang after her. Then I tell you, here the boy forgot his caution about waking Fronzy. We went for him, Prince and I. Prince is a noble fellow. Here the dog's ears twitched very perceptibly, and he kept at that man. Oh, how he bit him, till he had to run for fear the monkey would get killed. "Was Fronzy frightened?" asked Ben. "She's never seen strangers." "Not a bit," said the boy cheerily. "She just clung to me like everything. I only wish she was my sister," he added impulsively. "What were you going to do with her if I hadn't come along?" asked Ben. "Well, I got out on the main road," said the boy, "because I thought anybody who had lost her would probably come through this way. But if somebody hadn't come, I was going to carry her into Hingham, and the father and I'd had to contrive some way to do." "Well," said Ben, as the boy finished and fastened his bright eyes on him, "somebody did come along, and now I must get her home about as fast as I can for poor Mammy and Polly." "Yes," said the boy, "I'll help you lift her. Perhaps she won't wake up." The big dog moved away a step or two, but still kept his eye on Fronzy. "There," said the boy brightly, as they laid the child on the wagon seat. "Now when you get in, you can hold her head. That's it," he added, seeing them both fixed to his satisfaction. But still, Ben lingered. "Thank you," he tried to say. "I know," laughed the boy. "Only it's Prince instead of me." And he pulled forward the big black creature who had followed faithfully down the hill to see the last of it. "To the front, sir. There." "We're coming to see you," he continued, "if you will let us. Where do you live?" "Do come," said Ben, lighting up, for he was just feeling he couldn't bear to look his last on the merry, honest face. "Anybody'll tell you where Mrs. Pepper lives." "Is she a pepper?" asked the boy, laughing and pointing to the unconscious little heap in the wagon. "And are you a pepper?" "Yes," said Ben, laughing too. "There are 5 of us besides Mother." "Jolly, that's something like. Goodbye. Come on, Prince." Then away home to Mother. Fronzy never woke up or turned over once till she was put, a little pink sleepy heap, into her mother's arms. Joel was there, crying bitterly at his forlorn search. The testy old gentleman in the seat opposite had relented and ordered the coach about, and brought him home in an outburst of grief when all hope was gone. And one after another they all had come back, disheartened, to the distracted mother. Polly alone clung to hope. "Ben will bring her, Mammy. I know God will let him," she whispered. But when Ben did bring her, Polly, for the second time in her life, tumbled over with a gasp into old Mrs. Bascom's lap. Home and Mother! Little Fronzy slept all that night straight through. The neighbours came in softly and with awe-struck visages stole into the bedroom to look at the child. And as they crept out again, thoughts of their own little ones tugging at their hearts, the tears would drop unheeded. New friends. Up the stairs of the hotel, 2 steps at a time, ran a boy with a big black dog at his heels. "Come on, Prince. Soft now," as they neared a door at the end of the corridors. It opened into a corner room overlooking the park, as the small open space in front of the hotel was called. Within the room there was sunshine and comfort, it being the most luxurious one in the house, which the proprietor had placed at the disposal of this most exacting guest. He didn't look very happy, however. The gentleman who sat in an easy chair by the window, a large, handsome old gentleman whose whole bearing showed plainly that personal comfort had always been his, and was, therefore, neither a matter of surprise nor thankfulness. "Where have you been?" he asked, turning around to greet the boy who came in, followed by Prince. "Oh, such a long story, Father," he cried, flushed, his eyes sparkling as he flung back the dark hair from his forehead. "You can't even guess." "Never mind now," said the old gentleman testily. "Your stories are always long. The paper hasn't come. Strange, indeed, that one must needs be so annoyed. Do ring that bell again." So the bell was pulled, and a porter popped in his head. "What is it, sir?" "The paper," said the old gentleman irritably. "Hasn't it come yet?" "No, sir," said the man, and then he repeated, "'Tain't in yet, please, sir." "Very well. You said so once. That's all," waving his hand. Then, as the door closed, he said to his son, "That pays one for coming to such an out-of-the-way country place as this, away from papers. I never will do it again." As the old gentleman, against the advice of many friends who knew his dependence on externals, had determined to come to this very place, the boy was not much startled at the decisive words. He stood very quietly, however, until his father finished. Then he said, "It's too bad, Father. Supposing I tell you my story? Perhaps you'll enjoy hearing it while you wait. It's really quite newspaperish." "Well, you might as well tell it now, I suppose," said the old gentleman. "But it is a great shame about that paper. To advertise that morning papers are to be obtained. It's a swindle, Jasper, a complete swindle." And the old gentleman looked so very irate that the boy exerted himself to soothe him. "I know," he said, "but they can't help the trains being late." "They shouldn't have the trains late," said his father, unreasonably. "There's no necessity for all this prating about trains late. I'm convinced it's because they forgot to send down for the papers till they were all sold." "I don't believe that's it, Father," said the boy, trying to change the subject. "But you don't know how splendid Prince has been, nor—" "And then such a breakfast," continued the old gentleman. My liver certainly will be in a dreadful state if these things continue. And he got up, and going to the corner of the room, opened his medicine chest, and taking a box of pills therefrom, he swallowed two, which done, he came back with a somewhat easier expression to his favourite chair. "He was just splendid, father," began the boy. "He went for him, I tell you." "I hope, Jasper, your dog has not been doing anything violent," said the old gentleman. "I must caution you. He'll get you into trouble some day, and then there'll be a heavy bill to pay. He grows more irritable every day." "Irritable!" cried the boy, flinging his arms around the dog's neck, who was looking up at the old gentleman in high disdain. "He's done the most splendid thing you ever saw. Why, he saved a little girl, father, from a cross old organ man, and he drove that man. Oh, you ought to have seen him run." And now that it was over, Jasper put back his head and laughed long and loud as he remembered the rapid transit of the musical pair. "Well, how do you know she wasn't the man's daughter?" asked his father, determined to find fault some way. "You haven't any business to go around the country setting your dog on people. I shall have an awful bill to pay some day, Jasper. An awful bill," he continued, getting up and commencing to pace up and down the floor in extreme irritation. "Father," cried the boy, half laughing, half vexed, springing to his side and keeping step with him. "We found her brother. He came along when we were by the side of the road. We couldn't go any further, for the poor little thing was all tired out. And don't you think they live over in Badgertown and—" "Well," said the old gentleman, pausing in his walk and taking out his watch to wonder if that paper would ever come. She had probably followed the organ man, so it served her right after all. "Well, but father," and the boy's dark eyes glowed, "she was such a cunning little thing. She wasn't more than 4 years old, and she had such a pretty little yellow head, and she said so funny, 'I want Polly.'" "Did she?" said the old gentleman, getting interested in spite of himself. "What then?" "Why then, sir," said Jasper, delighted at his success in diverting his thoughts, "Prince and I waited, and I was just going to bring her here to ask you what we should do, when—" "Dear me," said the old gentleman, instinctively starting back as if he actually saw the forlorn little damsel. "You needn't ever bring such people here, Jasper. I don't know what to do with them, I'm sure." "Well," said the boy, laughing, "we didn't have to, did we, Prince?" stroking the big head of the dog who was slowly following the two as they paced up and down, but keeping carefully on the side of his master. "For just as we really didn't know what to do, don't you think there was a big wagon came along, drawn by the ricketiest old horse, and a boy in the wagon looking both sides of the road and into every bush, just as wild as he could be, and before I could think, hardly, he spied us, and if he didn't jump, I thought he'd broken his leg." "And I suppose he just abused you for what you had done," observed the old gentleman, petulantly. "That's about all the gratitude there is in this world." "He didn't seem to see me at all," said the boy. "I thought he'd eat the little girl up." "Ought to have looked out for her better then," grumbled the old gentleman, determined to find fault with somebody. "And he's a splendid fellow, I just know," cried Jasper, waxing enthusiastic. "And his name is Pepper." "Pepper," repeated his father. "No nice family ever had the name of Pepper." "Well, I don't care," and Jasper's laugh was loud and merry. "He's nice anyway, I know, and the little thing's nice, and I'm going to see them. Can't I, father?" "Dear me," said his father. "How can you, Jasper? You do have the strangest tastes I ever saw." "It's dreadful dull here," pleaded the boy, touching the right string. "You know that yourself, father, and I don't know any boys around here, and Prince and I are so lonely on our walks. Do permit me, father." The old gentleman, who really cared very little about it, turned away, muttering, "Well, I'm sure I don't care. Go where you like," when a knock was heard at the door and the paper was handed in, which broke up the conversation and restored good humour. The next day but one, Ben was out by the woodpile, trying to break up some kindlings for Polly, who was washing up the dishes and otherwise preparing for the delights of baking day. "Hello," said a voice Beth thought he knew. He turned around to see the merry-faced boy and the big black dog, who immediately began to wag his tail as if willing to recognize him. "You see, I thought you'd never look round," said the boy with a laugh. "How's the little girl?" "Oh, you have come, really?" cried Ben, springing over the woodpile with a beaming face. "Polly!" But Polly was already by the door, with dishcloth in hand. "This is my sister, Polly," began Ben, and then stopped, not knowing the boy's name. "I'm Jasper King," said the boy, stepping upon the flat stone by Polly's side, and taking off his cap, he put out his hand. "And this is Prince," he added. Polly put her hand in his and received a hearty shake, and then she sprang over the big stove, dishcloth and all, and just flung her arms around the dog's neck. "Oh, you splendid fellow, you," said she. "Don't you know we all think you're as good as gold?" The dog submitted to the astonishing proceeding as if he liked it, while Jasper, delighted with Polly's appreciation, beamed down on them and struck up friendship with her on the instant. "Now I must call Fronzy," said Polly, getting up, her face as red as a rose. "Is her name Fronzy?" asked the boy with interest. "No, it's Sophronia," said Polly, "but we call her Fronzy." "What a very funny name," said Jasper. "Sophronia is, for such a little thing. And yours is Polly, is it not?" he asked, turning around suddenly on her. "Yes," said Polly. "No, not truly, Polly. It's Mary, my real name is. But I've always been Polly." "I like Polly best, too," declared Jasper. "It sounds so nice." "And his name is Ben," said Polly. "Ebenezer, you mean," said Ben, correcting her. "Well, we call him Ben," said Polly. "It don't ever seem as if there was any Ebenezer about it." "I should think not," laughed Jasper. "Well, I must get Fronzy," again said Polly, running back into the bedroom, where that small damsel was busily engaged in washing Baby in the basin of water that she had, with extreme difficulty, succeeded in getting down on the floor. She had then, by means of a handful of soft soap, taken from Polly's soap bowl during the dishwashing, and a bit of old cotton, plastered both herself and Baby to a comfortable degree of stickiness. "Fronzy," said Polly. "Dear me, what you doing? The big dog's out there, you know, that scared the naughty organ man, and the boy—" But before the words were half out, Fronzy had slipped from under her hands, and to Polly's extreme dismay, clattered out into the kitchen. "Here she is!" cried Jasper, meeting her at the door. The little soapy hands were grasped and kissing her. "Ugh!" he said, as the soft soap plentifully spread on her face met his mouth. "Oh, Fronzy, you shouldn't!" cried Polly, and then they all burst out into a peal of laughter at Jasper's funny grimaces. "She's been washing Baby," explained Polly, wiping her eyes and looking at Fronzy, who was hanging over Prince in extreme affection. Evidently, Prince still regarded her as his especial property. "Have you got a baby?" asked Jasper. "I thought she was the baby," pointing to Fronzy. "Oh, I mean her littlest dolly. She always calls her Baby," said Polly. "Come, Fronzy, and have your face washed and a clean apron on." When Fronzy could be fairly persuaded that Prince would not run away during her absence, she allowed herself to be taken off and soon reappeared, her own dainty little self. Ben, in the meantime, had been initiating Jasper into the mysteries of cutting the wood, the tool house, and all the surroundings of the little brown house. They had received a reinforcement in the advent of Joel and David, who stared delightedly at Fronzy's protector, made friends with the dog, and altogether had had such a thoroughly good time that Fronzy, coming back, clapped her hands in glee to hear them. "I wish Mammy was home," said Polly, polishing up the last cup carefully. "Let me put it up," said Jasper, taking it from her. "It goes up here, don't it, with the rest?" Reaching up to the upper shelf of the old cupboard. "Yes," said Polly. "Oh, I should think you'd have real good times," said the boy enviously. "I haven't a single sister or brother." "Haven't you?" said Polly, looking at him in extreme pity. "Yes, we do have real fun," she added, answering his questioning look. "The house is just brimful sometimes, even if we are poor." "We aren't poor," said Joel, who never could bear to be pitied. Then, with a very proud air, he said in a grand way, "At any rate, we aren't going to be long, for something's coming." "What do you mean, Joey?" asked Ben, while the rest looked equally amazed. "Our ships," said Joel confidently, as if they were right before their eyes, at which they all screamed. "See Polly's stove!" cried Fronzy, wishing to entertain in her turn. "Here 'tis," running up to it and pointing with her fat little finger. "Yes, I see," cried Jasper, pretending to be greatly surprised. "It's new, isn't it?" "Yes," said the child. "It's very all new. 4 yesterdays ago." And then Polly stopped in, sweeping up and related, with many additions and explanations from the others, the history of the stove and good Dr. Fisher, upon whom they all dilated at great length, and the dreadful measles, and everything. And Jasper sympathized and rejoiced with them to their heart's content, and altogether got so very homelike that they all felt as if they had known him for a year. Ben neglected his work a little, but then visitors didn't come every day to the Peppers, so while Polly worked away at her bread, which she was going to make like biscuits, she said, the audience gathered in the little old kitchen was in the merriest mood and enjoyed everything to the fullest extent. "Do put in another stick, Benzie dear," said Polly. "This bread won't be fit for anything." "Isn't this fun, though?" cried Jasper, running up to try the oven. "I wish I could ever bake." And he looked longingly at the little brown biscuits waiting their turn out on the table. "You come out some day," said Polly sociably, "and we'll all try baking. Mammy'd like to have you, I know," feeling sure that nothing would be too much for Mrs. Pepper to do for the protector of little Phronsie. "I will," cried Jasper, perfectly delighted. "You can't think how awfully dull it is out in Hingham." "Don't you live there?" asked Polly, with a gasp, almost dropping a tin full of little brown lumps of dough she was carrying to the oven. "Live there!" cried Jasper, and then he burst out into a merry laugh. "No, indeed. I hope not. Why, we're only spending the summer there, Father and I, in the hotel." "Where's your mother?" asked Joel, squeezing in between Jasper and his audience. And then they all felt instinctively that a very wrong question had been asked. "I haven't any mother," said the boy in a low voice. They all stood quite still for a moment. Then Polly said, "I wish you'd come out sometime, and you may bake, or anything else," she added, and there was a kinder ring to her voice than ever. No mother. Polly, for her life, couldn't imagine how anybody could feel without a mother, but the very words alone smote her heart, and there was nothing she wouldn't have done to give pleasure to one who had done so much for them. "I wish you could see our mother," she said gently. "Why, here she comes now. Oh, Mamsie dear," she cried. "Do, Joe, run and take her bundle." Mrs. Pepper stopped a minute to kiss Phronsie. Her baby was dearer than ever to her now. Then her eye fell on Jasper, who stood respectfully waiting and watching her with great interest. "Is this?" she asked, taking it all in at the first glance, the boy with the honest eyes as Ben had described him, and the big black dog. "Is this the boy who saved my little girl?" "Oh, ma'am," cried Jasper. "I didn't do much. 'Twas Prince." "I guess you never'll know how much you did do," said Mrs. Pepper, then looking with a long, keen gaze into the boy's eyes that met her own so frankly and kindly. "I'll trust him," she said to herself. "A boy with those eyes can't help but be good." Her eyes are just the same as Polly's, thought Jasper. Just such laughing ones, only Polly's are brown, and he liked her on the spot. And then, somehow, the hubbub ceased. Polly went on with her work, and the others separated, and Mrs. Pepper and Jasper had a long talk. When the mother's eyes fell on Phronsie playing around on the floor, she gave the boy a grateful smile that he thought was beautiful. "Well, I declare," said Jasper, at last, looking up at the old clock in the corner by the side of the cupboard. "I'm afraid I'll miss the stage, and then Father never'll let me come again. Come, Prince." "Oh, don't go," cried Phronsie, wailing. "Let Doggy stay. Oh, make him stay, Mammy." "I can't, Phronsie," said Mrs. Pepper, smiling, "if he thinks he ought to go." "I'll come again," said Jasper, eagerly. "If I may, ma'am." He looked up at Mrs. Pepper, as he stood, cap in hand, waiting for the answer. "I'm sure we should be glad if your father'll be willing," she added, thinking proudly, "My children are an honor to anybody, I'm sure," as she glanced around on the bright little group she could call her own. "But be sure, Jasper," and she laid her hand on his arm as she looked down into his eyes, "that you father is willing. That's all." "Oh, yes, ma'am," said the boy, "but he will be, I guess, if he feels well." "Then come on Thursday," said Polly, "and can't we bake something then, Mammy?" "I'm sure I don't care," laughed Mrs. Pepper, "but you won't find much but brown flour and meal to bake with." "Well, we can pretend," said Polly, "and we can cut the cakes with the heart shape, and they'll do for anything." "Oh, I'll come," laughed Jasper, ready for such lovely fun in the old kitchen. "Look out for me on Thursday, Ben." So Jasper and Prince took their leave, all the children accompanying them to the gate, and then after seeing him, fairly started on a smart run to catch the stage. Prince scampering at his heels, they all began to sing his praises and to wish for Thursday to come. But Jasper didn't come. Thursday came and went, a beautiful, bright, sunny day, but with no signs of the merry boy whom all had begun to love, nor of the big black dog. The children had made all the needful preparations with much ostentation and bustle, and were in a state of excited happiness, ready for any gale. But the last hope had to be given up, as the old clock ticked away hour after hour, and at last Polly had to put Fronzy to bed, who wouldn't stop crying enough to eat her supper at the dreadful disappointment. "He couldn't come, I know," said both Ben and Polly, standing staunchly up for their new friend, but Joel and David felt that he had broken his word. "He promised," said Joel, vindictively. "I don't believe his father had let him," said Polly, wiping away a sly tear. "I know Jasper'd come, if he could." Mrs. Pepper wisely kept her own counsel, simply giving them a kindly caution. "Don't you go to judging him, children, till you know." "Well, he promised," said Joel, as a settler. "Aren't you ashamed, Joel," said his mother, "to talk about anyone whose back is turned? Wait till he tells you the reason himself." Joel hung his head, and then began to tease David in the corner to make up for his disappointment. The next morning Ben had to go to the store after some more meal. As he was going out rather dismally, the storekeeper, who was also postmaster, called out, "Oh, hello there." "What is it?" asked Ben, turning back, thinking perhaps Mr. Atkins hadn't given him the right change. "Here," said Mr. Atkins, stepping up to the post office department, quite smart with its array of boxes and official notices, where Ben had always lingered, wishing there might be sometime a letter for him, or some of them. "You've got a sister Polly, haven't you?" "Yes," said Ben, wondering what was coming next. "Well, she's got a letter," said the postmaster, holding up a nice big envelope, looking just like those that Ben had so many times wished for. That magic piece of white paper danced before the boy's eyes for a minute. Then he said, "It can't be for her, Mr. Atkins. Why, she's never had one." "Well, she's got one now, sure enough," said Mr. Atkins. "Here 'tis, plain enough." And he read what he had no need to study much, as it had already passed examination by his own and his wife's faithful eyes. "Miss Polly Pepper, near the turnpike, Badgertown. That's her, isn't it?" he added, laying it down before Ben's eyes. "Must be a first time for everything, you know, my boy," and he laughed long over his own joke. "So take it and run along home." For Ben still stood looking at it and not offering to stir. "If you say so," said the boy, as if Mr. Atkins had given him something out of his own pocket. "But I'm afraid 'tisn't for Polly." Then, buttoning up the precious letter in his jacket, he spun along home as never before. "Polly! Polly!" he screamed. "Where is she, Mother?" "I don't know," said Mrs. Pepper, coming out of the bedroom. "Dear me, is anybody hurt, Ben?" "I don't know," said Ben, in a state to believe anything. "But Polly's got a letter." "Polly got a letter," cried Mrs. Pepper. "What do you mean, Ben?" "I don't know," repeated the boy, still holding out the precious letter. "But Mr. Atkins gave it to me. Where is Polly?" "I know where she is," said Joel. "She's upstairs." and he flew out in a twinkling, and just as soon reappeared with Polly scampering after him in the wildest excitement. And then the kitchen was in an uproar as the precious missive was put into Polly's hand, and they all gathered around her, wondering and examining, till Ben thought he would go wild with the delay. "I wonder where it did come from," said Polly, in the greatest anxiety, examining again the address. "Where does the postmark say?" asked Mrs. Pepper, looking over her shoulder. "It's all rubbed out," said Polly, peering at it. "You can't see anything." "Do open it," said Ben, "and then you'll find out." "But p'raps 'tisn't for me," said Polly timidly. "Well, Mr. Atkins says 'tis," said Ben impatiently. "Here, I'll open it for you, Polly." "No, let her open it for herself, Ben," protested his mother. "But she won't," said Ben. "Do tear it open, Polly." "No, I'm going to get a knife," she said. "I'll get one," cried Joel, running up to the table drawer. "Here's one, Polly." "Oh, dear," groaned Ben. "You never'll get it open at this rate." But at last it was cut, and they all, holding their breath, gazed awestruck, while Polly drew out the mysterious missive. "What does it say?" gasped Mrs. Pepper. "Dear Miss Polly," began both Ben and Polly in a breath. "Let Polly read," said Joel, who couldn't hear in the confusion. "Well, go on, Polly," said Ben. "Hurry." "Dear Miss Polly, I was so sorry I couldn't come on Thursday." "Oh, it's Jasper! It's Jasper!" cried all the children in a breath. "I told you so!" cried Ben and Polly, perfectly delighted to find their friend vindicated fully. "There! Joey Pepper!" "Well, I don't care," cried Joe, nothing daunted. "He didn't come anyway. Do go on, Polly." "I was so sorry I couldn't come," began Polly. "You read that," said Joel. "I know it," said Polly, "but it's just lovely. On Thursday. But my father was sick, and I couldn't leave him. If you don't mind, I'll come again. I'll come some other day, if it's just as convenient for you, for I do so want the baking and the nice time. I forgot to say that I had a cold, too." Here Jasper had evidently had a struggle in his mind, whether there should be 2 O's or 1, and he had at last decided it, by crossing out one. "But my father is willing I should come when I get well. Give my love to all, and especially remember me respectfully to your mother. Your friend, Jasper Elliot King." "Oh, lovely! Lovely!" cried Polly, flying around with the letter in her hand. "So he is coming!" Ben was just as wild as she was, for no one knew but Polly just how the new friend had stepped into his heart. Fronzy went to sleep happy, hugging Baby. "And don't you think, Baby dear," she whispered sleepily, and Polly heard her say as she was tucking her in, "that Jasper is really coming. Really, and the big beautiful doggy too."